Okay, real talk for a second. Ever lay awake at night thinking like, what if I'd gone for that other job? Or what if I'd actually said yes when? I know I do, at least. It's crazy, right? Like we've got all these other lives we could have lived just hiding in our heads. And that's kind of what we're getting into today with The Midnight Library by Matt Haig.
What's so wild about this book is it takes those what ifs and
Yeah.
like makes them real.
Yeah.
We're going deep on not just the story, but we've got reader reviews from Goodreads and even some notes for a video review. So it's like seeing the book from all these angles.
Love it. So if you're someone just adding this book to your reading list, no worries. We're staying spoiler-free here.
Yep, we're sticking to the big ideas, the questions that makes you think about.
Right.
And if you've already been through the Midnight Library, get ready, because we're going to dig into those what-if choices. We're going to talk about regret, like, is it all bad? And that whole idea of a perfect life. Does it even exist?
Love that. So picture this. A library that shows up right between life and death. Bam. That's the Midnight Library in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Our main character, she's Nora Seed, and she's, well, not exactly loving her life, a lot of regret there. And then, boom, she finds this library.
Whoa.
And each book is a whole different life she could have had.
Okay, now that is a cool concept. It really gets to something we all think about, regret.
Totally.
Everyone's got them. But imagine, like, actually getting to test drive those other versions of you. See how things would have played out if you'd gone left instead of right,
Tempting.
Right.
I mean, who wouldn't want to rewind those moments you kind of wish you could take back? But looking at the Goodreads reviews, it seems people had like all sorts of reactions to Nora's little life makeover experiment.
Totally.
Some folks, like Danielle and Susan's reviews, they were just sucked in, totally felt it. But then you've got others, like Black Oxford and Added Turbo, not so convinced.
Right, and that's where this deep dive gets really juicy. It's not just, here's what happens. It's about why this book hit so hard for some and just, hey, for others.
Totally.
Some reviewers, like Natalia and Yin, brought up a really big thing is just thinking happy thoughts enough when you're dealing with, the heavy stuff like depression.
Right.
And the book kind of wrestles with that, which is interesting.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if the Midnight Library is like oversimplifying things. Is it all just self-help with a fantasy cover, like some reviewers were saying? Or is there something deeper about how our choices connect and, like, create ripples?
And that's where the regret part gets super interesting. Because it's not saying regret is this monster you gotta slay. It's more like maybe regret makes you grow, helps you understand yourself better.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Now, in the notes for a video review, there's this cool point about pointing out the difference between what we expect from a book versus, what it's actually like to read it. So how does the Midnight Library play with those expectations?
Well, you might think, going in, it'll be all light and breezy, fun with parallel universes. And sure, there's some of that, but this thing gets deep, like emotionally deep, sometimes uncomfortable even.
So it's not just a beach read then?
Not exactly. It's got that what-if wonder, but it doesn't sugarcoat things. It's about regret, and that can mess with your head.
Makes you think back to the Goodreads reviews. Some people, like Emily May and Lisa of Troy, felt Nora wasn't that relatable. Maybe that's why. Because the book's not afraid to go to those darker places, emotionally.
You might be onto something there. It's tough writing about mental health in a way that's both real and, like, someone you'd want to hang out with.
Right.
Some readers are going to see themselves in Nora's struggles. Others, maybe not so much.
It's funny, though, right? We're seeing all these different takes on the book. Like, Miranda Reed's was all about the ethereal magic of the library, while Nicole straight up said it was predictable and boring. How do we make sense of people having such opposite reactions to the same story?
I think it just shows that reading is super personal. We all come to a book with our own stuff, our own experiences.
Right.
So what works for one person might not do it for another.
Which is kind of nice, right?
Yeah.
It means there's no right or wrong way to read. It's all about what you get out of it.
Absolutely. And those different takes can actually make our understanding of the book richer,
Yeah.
Start some really good conversations.
It's like there's this line in the Goodreads description about Nora being able to undo every one of her regrets as she tries to work out her perfect life. If you had that shot, what regret would you try to fix?
Wow.
I mean, where would you even begin?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's easy to get all dreamy about those what ifs. But the book forces you to think about how messy choices are. Would undoing a regret really make things better? Or would it just create new problems?
Right, like a whole new set of what ifs. So maybe it's not about finding the perfect life, but more like accepting that life's just kind of messy.
And imperfect.
Yeah.
And maybe the lesson is regret sucks, but it can also make you wiser, make you realize things about yourself.
So we've kind of laid it out. The Midnight Library isn't your typical light fantasy read. It goes deep, has some big questions about regret, choices, and what it means to live a good life.
Totally. And as we keep going with this deep dive, we're going to break down those themes even more. We'll look at how the book is put together, the characters, the whole philosophy behind it.
Oh yeah, the philosophy of regret.
Exactly. It's a wild ride.
We'll also look at what people loved and hated, like why this book made some people cheer and others, well, kind of tear their hair out.
Definitely. It's a book that gets people talking, that's for sure. You know, one thing we saw a lot in the Goodreads reviews, people saying, the book's idea, cool, but like the way it's done, not always hitting the mark.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like some folks, Emily B. and Claudia Lomley come to mind, felt it got kind of repetitive with Nora jumping between all those lives.
But isn't that kind of the point, though? Like, the whole idea that no matter what you choose, there's always going to be stuff you got to deal with, disappointments. Maybe that repetition is, like, showing us there's no such thing as perfect, even when you can rewrite your whole story.
Wow, that's a good point. And it kind of ties into this big philosophy thing the book's wrestling with, that happiness isn't about getting everything you think you want.
Right?
It's about being okay with where you're at, finding what makes life, good.
So it's less about running from your problems and more about, like, learning how to handle them so you can actually grow from them.
Exactly. And that links back to how the book deals with potential. The Goodreads description, it's all about Nora getting to undo every one of her regrets to find her perfect life.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is, it never actually says what perfect even means. It's up to you to decide, which kind of suggests maybe the journey itself is more important than the destination.
Ooh, I like that. And that journey we see, it's got its ups and downs. Some of those other lives Nora checks out, they're amazing. She gets to go after her dreams, feels like she's got a purpose, something she never had before. But then some lives are full of, well, heartbreak, loss, even tragedy.
And that's where choosing gets really interesting. Because it's not just good choice, bad choice.
Right.
It's about realizing every choice, even the ones that seem awesome at first, they come with a price, with stuff you didn't see coming.
Oh, totally. This makes me think about that video review note again. It said, a good review should compare The Midnight Library to other popular books like it. Now, I haven't read a ton of books about, parallel universes and stuff, but I love stories about how choices can change everything. What about you? Any books come to mind?
Ooh, yeah, actually. There are a few that play with similar ideas, like Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. It's all about living multiple lives, but in a different way, showing how little things can make huge changes. And The 712 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, that one's more of a mystery, but with this time loop thing where the guy's got to solve a murder to escape.
Those sound awesome. Got to check those out. But what's interesting is those books don't seem to really dig into regret the way The Midnight Library does. Like, Matt Haig really wants us to face those what-if thoughts, even if they're uncomfortable.
Totally. And he does it in a way that, like, you get it, you feel it. He doesn't shy away from how much regret can hurt, but he also shows how it can be a good thing, something that helps you learn and become a better you.
Ooh, that reminds me of something Jessica said in her review. She said the book made her realize sometimes the things we regret the most are the things that make us who we are. So those imperfections, they're actually part of what makes you, well, you.
That is so true, and it goes back to that whole self-acceptance thing, because the Midnight Library isn't really about finding this perfect, no-regrets life. It's more about learning to be okay with who you are, even with all the messy bits.
I like that. This whole conversation is making me rethink how I look at my own regrets.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in those what-if spirals, but maybe, like you said, there's a way to see them as chances to learn, not as something to be ashamed of.
Totally. And maybe that's one of the biggest things we can take away from this book, that, yeah, regret hurts, but it can also make you understand yourself and your choices in a much deeper way.
Okay, so we've talked a bunch about regret, choices, and potential. But there's another piece here I want to unpack. What makes a life fulfilling? Does the book actually answer that, or is it more about making us ask ourselves what really matters?
That is a great question, and it goes straight to the heart of what this book's trying to say, because the Midnight Library isn't giving you a step-by-step guide to happiness.
Right.
It's more like it shows you a bunch of different ways to live and asks which one feels right to you.
Oh, I see. It's like the book is saying, hey, here's a menu of lives. What looks good to you?
Exactly. And the cool part is there's no right answer. What makes one person's life awesome might be totally different for someone else.
And that's where the book's focus on being an individual comes in. It's not about fitting into some mold of success or happiness. It's about finding what works for you with your own talents and passions.
And that path, like we see with Nora, it's never a straight line.
Totally.
It's full of twists and turns, unexpected bumps in the road, and times when you just want to give up.
This reminds me of what Jay Linney said in her review. She thought Nora was frustrating sometimes because she couldn't make up her mind and just went with the flow too much. But isn't that how a lot of us are when it comes to big choices? We're scared to commit, second-guessing ourselves.
That's so true, and it shows that the book isn't trying to make everyone perfect. Nora's not some superhero. She's a real person with flaws, doubts, and the fear of messing things up, which makes her relatable.
Right. Even though we don't have a magical library to test out different lives, we all have those moments where we're not sure what to do. We wonder if we're on the right track, if we're missing out on something better.
And that's where the book's message of hope shines through. Even though Nora screws up, even though she stumbles and falls, she eventually gets to a place where she's okay with herself.
And she gets there by realizing what really matters, connection, feeling like you have a purpose, belonging somewhere. It's not about some big achievement. It's about finding what makes you feel good on the inside.
And that's something that really resonates with me. The world's always telling you to achieve this, be the best at that. But the Midnight Library reminds you that real happiness comes from living in a way that's true to yourself, your own values, and the things you love.
Now, the video review notes mention something about talking about potential for a sequel. Obviously, the Midnight Library wraps up nicely. But does anything in the book hint that there could be more to explore?
Ooh, good question. It speaks to how powerful a good story can be. There's no direct setup for a sequel, but the ending definitely leaves things open. Like Nora's journey of self-discovery, it feels like it's just getting started.
That's like the library itself, right? All those endless shelves of possibilities. Kind of like life itself, always twisting and turning, taking you places you never expected.
Exactly, and that's what makes the book stick with you. It doesn't give you easy answers or wrap everything up in a bow. It leaves you wondering, what if? And wanting to keep exploring, both in the book's world and your own life.
Okay, so we've covered the regret, the choices, the potential, and finding a life that feels good. But there's a flip side to all of that I want to touch on. How does the Midnight Library handle the darker stuff, the hard parts of those themes?
One thing that really hit me was how honest the book is about depression. Nora's story starts with her trying to end her life. It's a serious reminder that regret and feeling hopeless can really mess with your mental health.
It's different, not sugarcoating anything.
Yeah.
The book shows how raw and painful depression can be. But there's also hope in there, this idea that even when things are really bad, you can heal and change.
And that's where the library becomes this awesome symbol. It's like a place of possibility where you can face your fears and regrets and maybe find a way to feel more at peace.
Makes me think of what Cindy said in her review. She said the book helped her see her own struggles with depression differently.
Oh, how so?
She realized her negative thoughts weren't necessarily true. They were just like possibilities. And she could choose different thoughts, create a better reality for herself.
That's such a powerful takeaway. It shows how the book empowers you. Even though Nora starts out lost and hopeless, she learns that she can choose her own path, her own thoughts, and create a life that feels good to her.
And that power, it's not about having a perfect life with no problems. It's about being strong, being kind to yourself, and being brave enough to face the messiness of life.
Totally. And that's something a lot of people connect with, especially those dealing with mental health stuff. It reminds you that you're not alone, and even when it's dark, there's always hope for things to get better.
Now, something I've been wondering about is how the book handles death. I mean, the whole story revolves around this library between life and death. Does it offer any insights into what might be waiting on the other side?
Ooh, that's a deep one. And the book kind of dances around it with a mix of mystery and speculation. It doesn't give you a straight answer about the afterlife, but it hints that death isn't necessarily the end. Maybe it's more like a doorway to something else.
So it's more about making us think about the big mysteries, not about giving us all the answers.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so interesting. It encourages you to grapple with these big questions about life, purpose, and reality itself without shoving any one belief down your throat.
That reminds me of something David Putnam said. He said the book helped him not be so scared of death.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he started seeing it not as the end, but as a change, a transition into something unknown, maybe even something peaceful.
That's a really beautiful way to look at it. And it shows how the book can be comforting even when it's dealing with those big unknowns, because at the end of the day, we don't know what happens after we die. But the Midnight Library suggests that maybe death isn't something to fear, just a natural part of being human, something we can be curious about and open to.
Okay, so we've really dug into regret, choices, potential, that search for a good life, even the mysteries of death. But I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, how different people can get totally different things from the same book. How does the Midnight Library explain that?
Ooh, that's a smart question. And it gets to the heart of what makes literature so powerful. Because unlike, say, a science book, a novel doesn't have just one meaning. It's up to the reader to connect with the story, bring their own experiences to it, and decide what it means to them.
So it's like the book is a mirror, showing each reader something different about themselves and the world.
Exactly. And that's what makes reading so personal. What one person finds amazing, another might think is cheesy.
Hmm.
What one person relates to, another might totally disagree with. And that's okay. It actually shows how rich and complex the book is. If it can spark so many different reactions, it must be touching on something universal, something we all connect with on some level.
Absolutely. That's what makes this deep dive so cool. We're not just looking at the book itself. We're exploring all the different ways people have reacted to it, the good, the bad, and the everything in between.
It's like we're building this huge tapestry of meaning, taking all those different interpretations and creating something even richer and more interesting.
Love that.
Mm.
And that tapestry, like you said, it's full of color and texture. It's got deep thoughts, strong feelings, funny moments, and even some heated arguments.
For sure. It reminds you that books are alive. They change and grow with every person who reads them.
And reading can change you too. It can make you question things, see things from different angles, and even help you figure out your own life.
Definitely. Now, one thing that kept popping up in the Goodreads reviews was this question. Is the book oversimplifying tough issues like depression and regret?
Yeah, I saw that too.
Some people felt like it gave easy answers or relied too much on those feel-good sayings. What do you think about that?
Hmm. That's a tough one. I mean, it's got to be hard to write about those kinds of things in a way that's both real and relatable, right?
For sure. You want to acknowledge how complex and painful those things can be, but you also want to give people hope, show them that things can get better.
So it's like walking a tightrope.
Totally. And I think Matt Haig does a pretty good job of it. The Midnight Library might not be a psychology textbook, but it tells a powerful story about learning to love yourself and finding meaning in your life.
And maybe that's enough sometimes. Maybe we just need a story that reminds us we're not alone,
Okay.
and that even when it feels like everything sucks, there's still some good to be found.
And that good can come from anywhere. A kind word from a stranger, rediscovering something you love, or just realizing you have the power to change your thinking and create a better reality for yourself.
Now, the video review notes mentioned ending with a clear verdict. So if you had to sum up the Midnight Library in a few words, what would you say?
I'd say the Midnight Library makes you think and makes you feel. It explores regret, choices, and finding a life that feels right. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's a story that sticks with you, making you look at your own life and choices in a new way.
That's a great way to put it. And it shows how powerful the book is. It makes you ask those big questions, face your fears and regrets, and appreciate how amazing and messy life can be.
And that's what makes it such a good read. It challenges you to think, appreciate every moment, and realize that even when things are tough, you can heal, grow, and change for the better.
And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into the Midnight Library, I'm left feeling like my mind's been blown wide open.
know, right?
It's like the book has unlocked all these new ways of thinking, encouraging me to explore my own thoughts and to see the potential in every choice I make. You know, it's kind of crazy how the Midnight Library is so personal, but at the same time, like everyone can relate to it.
Right.
It's like it's talking directly to you, asking about your regrets, your dreams, but it's also tapping into this thing we all feel, wanting a life that feels, real and meaningful.
It's that mix of personal and universal that makes it so good. We see ourselves in Nora, even though her journey is totally unique.
Right.
And through what she goes through, we start asking ourselves those big questions about what really matters, how we want to live.
It's like the book's a mirror, showing us our own stuff, like what we want and what we're afraid of. But it also shows what we all have in common, those hopes and fears that connect us as, human beings.
And in that reflection, maybe we find some comfort, like a reminder that we're not alone in this. And even when things suck, there's always room for growth, change, and even joy.
Now, those video review notes talked about looking at what people are saying online, the good and the bad. We've touched on some of that, but is there anything else that really stands out? like things people keep arguing about or praising.
One thing that jumped out was this whole debate about whether the book is ultimately optimistic or pessimistic.
Oh, yeah, I saw that too.
Some people, like Ellie Goodwin and Emily B., they thought the ending was too perfect, too easy, like it oversimplified things. But then others, like Redding Temeshley and Niloufar Osmekik, they saw it as hopeful, this affirmation that you can choose happiness even after going through tough times.
It's wild how one ending can create such different reactions. It makes you wonder if the book is doing that on purpose, being kind of vague so the reader gets to decide how they see it.
And that vagueness, I think it's a good thing. It means more people can connect with it, people who are feeling hopeful and people who are struggling.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't tell you what to think, but it does show you that even in the darkness, there's always some light waiting to be found.
Okay, so we've covered the themes, the characters, what readers are saying. But I want to talk about the writing itself for a sec. What impressed you about Matt Haig's style, how he tells the story?
He's so good at blending fantasy and real life. Like, the whole idea of the Midnight Library is obviously magical, but the characters and their problems, they feel real, relatable.
Totally.
It's that mix of magic and everyday stuff that keeps you hooked.
Right. And the way he writes is so smooth, so engaging. He can capture big emotions with simple words, you know? He doesn't sugarcoat the tough stuff, but he also makes it funny, warm, and hopeful.
Totally. It's like a warm hug and a slap in the face at the same time.
Yeah. I remember Danielle saying in her review that the book made her laugh and cry, and she felt like she was right there with Nora, going through everything with her. It's like Matt Haig can transport you into the story, make you feel those alternate realities.
That's what makes a great writer, you know? They create a world so real you forget you're just reading words on a page.
Totally. Now, those video review notes mention something about addressing why people might hesitate to read the book. What do you think might hold some people back from picking up The Midnight Library?
Well, some folks might not be into the whole library hopping through lives thing. It might seem too out there, you know? Especially if they like more realistic stories.
Right.
And some people might not want to deal with heavy topics like depression and regret. Maybe they're looking for something lighter, a fun escape.
Yeah, I get that. But I think it's important to point out that even though The Midnight Library deals with tough stuff, it does it with kindness, humor, and a sense of hope. It's not all doom and gloom. It's a story about resilience, second chances, and the power we have to choose.
And it's a story that can speak to anyone, no matter who they are or what they've been through. Because deep down, we're all searching for the same things: a place to belong, a reason to get up in the morning, and a feeling that our lives matter.
It's like a universal language that need to feel connected and purposeful.
Exactly. So to those who might be on the fence about the Midnight Library, I'd say go for it. Step outside your comfort zone. Let yourself be challenged, moved, and even surprised. You might discover something amazing you weren't expecting.
And if you've already been through The Midnight Library, go back to those parts that really hit you. Think about how the book's ideas relate to your own life, your own regrets, your own hopes and dreams.
And talk about it. Share your thoughts with other people.
Yes.
Because the best books are the ones that get people talking, make them think in new ways, and ultimately help them understand themselves and the world a little bit better.
So as we close out this deep dive into The Midnight Library, I want to leave you with one last thought. If you had access to The Midnight Library, what would your first book choice say about you? What unlived life would you be dying to check out? Think about it. Let that question guide you as you explore all possibilities in your own life. Until next time, happy reading.